Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second session of storytelling this afternoon. We're here with Vanessa Johnson, who's going to be doing some tells for teens to celebrate Juneteenth. I want to also encourage you to check out our website and look at some of our art camps, of which Vanessa is teaching two for young children and teens. We're so excited to have her, and I'm going to just hand it right over to Vanessa.
So happy Juneteenth. So we now have a federal holiday in the United States celebrating the end of slavery, celebrating freedom. What is the most American thing that we can do as a people? It's to celebrate freedom. And so I am a griot, a storyteller in the West African tradition. And it is our job, our art form, to collect the stories of our community. I collect the stories of our country through time. And I love stories from Africa and from around the diaspora, all the places where African culture has been spread. But I love telling stories about our country and about social justice. In the tradition of West African griots, and in the tradition of any gathering, one of the things that is done is to honor your ancestors. It's not ancestor worshiping. It's about saying, I didn't make myself. People made a path for me in my journey for life, through life. So here is my calling of the ancestors. And these words are by Alice Walker, an African-American writer. To remember the ancestors means we are aware that we didn't make ourselves. We didn't make ourselves. We did not make ourselves. The line travels all the way back, perhaps to God or to gods. We remember them because it's easy to forget, easy to forget, easy to forget. We were not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace by which we live our lives, in spite of the pain and sorrows, is always a measure, always a measure, always a measure of what has gone before. Ashe, let it be. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, no more weeping, no more weeping over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive branch of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection herefore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. This was the proclamation that was given a general's orders when federal troops, Union troops from the North, landed in Galveston, Texas, and announced that they would enforce the Emancipation Proclamation that had been declared 2 years before. When the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, it did not mean that all enslaved people across the country were free. In fact, those states that had not seceded and had gone with the South, the Confederacy, but had stayed with the Union, but had slavery, did not have to give up their slaves. And it took Union troops, state by state, to actually arrive in states and to free the people. 1865 is the day that Texas slaves were liberated. And that is what we celebrate today. There was slavery in New York State until 1827, 2 years after the Erie Canal was finished. Witness this day, September the 22nd, 1804, that I, of the county of Cayuga in the state of New York, have sold as my property. I do bargain and sell by those present. A young girl by the name of Hannah, for the considerate sum of $150, $150, unto Peter Cuddeback of the town of Marcellus in the county of Onondaga in the state of New York. And I assign her forever, forever, whereunto I do sign my hand and seal. Witnesses Martin Courtwright, Moses Courtwright Jr. This is a sale of a girl that we think is about 12 years old that was sold in New York State in the year 1804, sold from Cayuga County to Onondaga County. What we have learned in further research, though, is that the Cuddeback family, this family may have bought her because they were abolitionists to free her. And in fact, a couple years later, when the US Census was taken, she does not appear as a part of their family or property. So we'd like to think Hannah was bought by these people right in Marcellus to free her. I felt something weird all day. Something wasn't right. I mean, I stayed at home all the time to take care of my little brother. And my mom and pa and my other sister and brother older than me, they would go to the field to pick cotton from the time the sun come up to late at night. And mama would then come home and she cooked something for us. And that night she came home. It didn't feel right. None of us felt right. Something was wrong. And the next day, when my mom and pa and my brother and sister were in the field, the master called me to the big house. And they takes my little brother from me. And they say, "See that wagon?" I look, they're a wagon with two white men. "We sold you. Go with them." "No, master, don't sell me." "Go on now. They own you now." "But master, go on, Mary." And the men, they come over and they grab me by my arm and I'm hollering and screaming, "Mama! Mama!" I can see her in the field. I can see my family in the field. And I'm yelling. So the men, they start singing. They start singing over my yelling. "Mama! Mama!" And they push me down in the back of a wagon. "Mama!" And they sing louder and louder so my mama, she can't hear me. and they drive me away. Mama! They don't even give me a chance to say goodbye. This is a story of Mary Ferguson in the 1930s during the Depression. Writers and artists and storytellers like me were hired by the US government because we didn't have any jobs. And we were hired to go into communities to interview those who were still alive who had been enslaved. So in the 1930s, about 100,000 formerly enslaved people were still alive in our country. And so their stories were taken down. There's even recordings in our national archives of their stories. And this is one of those stories. Mary Ferguson, we honor you. On Juneteenth, we remember you today. I had never got beat. My master, he didn't beat me much. Well, actually, I didn't get beat at all till I was a little older. See, that day, I was told to go to the garden to work. And see, I work in the kitchen. I help to cook. I mix things, I peel things, I put things in the oven I get wood for the fire for the stove. I don't know anything about no gardening. I ain't never been in the field. It was my job to work in the kitchen. But Mrs., she say, go out to the garden, Delcia. We need you to help with some weeding. I didn't know nothing about weeding. So I started pulling. And I guess I pulled up the wrong thing. Now, she had sent her daughter out there to look over me. She was sitting all cool with her fan and drinking while I worked. She wasn't no more older than me. So when I pull up the wrong thing, it was a carrot on the end. She come over and she hit me with her broom. Well, I picked up the hoe I had been working with and I ran after her. She was just running. And I ran after her. I was going to hit her if I had caught her, but she was a little too fast for me. When Master come home, he beat me. My first time being beat. But I wasn't going to let that girl just talk to me any kind of way and get mad at me for doing something I didn't know how to do. That is a story from Delcia Patterson. We fought slavery in so many ways, in little ways and in big ways. We rebelled, we resisted. We didn't just lay down as a people. We fought for our freedom and we fought for our individual freedom. She laid a candy on the table, but I didn't touch it. See, I was a little girl then, in 7, 8, and it was my job every morning to go get the pot out the bedroom and go throw it out, where they use the bathroom at night. Every morning I go to that room. First thing, throw out the pot water. And I saw that candy. She put it there on purpose for me to see. But I didn't touch it. See, I was always hungry. I didn't have no papa or mama in the field to bring me little eats. I was alone, working in the big house, living in the big house. I live in the hall outside the kitchen, sleep on the floor. They throw me scraps of food sometimes like I was a dog. So I was always hungry. And I saw that candy day after day. And then one morning I got so hungry, I just grabbed the candy. I threw it down real fast so no one see me. But later that day, the missus, she called me, Henrietta, come here. Yes, missus. Henrietta, did you take that candy? I ain't seen no candy, missus. You lying girl, you ate that candy. I didn't see no candy. I didn't eat no candy. Come here, girl, I'm gonna whoop you. And she went over to the fireplace and took down her switch. And she started beating on me, holding my arm, beating on my legs, but I was dancing. I kept moving. She couldn't get no good licks in. She would get madder and madder. So she called her daughter to come hold on to me. And I kept dancing still. And her daughter was getting more licks than me. So she went over and got the rocking chair. And she picked me up by my feet. I was just a little thing. And she threw me down on the floor. And she took that rocking chair and set it on my head. And then she sat down on the chair. And then she whooped me. When I come to, I'm laying on my pallet in the kitchen hall. And this doctor, he working on my mouth. He trying to get my mouth open. See, the chair had crushed in my face. And I couldn't open my mouth. And he would pull and pull it. Day after day, he come pulling. And finally, I was able to get my mouth open a little. But I can't eat no more. No tooth ever grow back on this side. And now I got this face. See, this face I can only eat gruel and oats and things. This face where children laugh at and point at. And babies cry when they see. I do my work. And I see the missus, she looking at this face she done made. And she looked down in shame when she see this creation, her creation. And I guess she get tired of this face because she sell me away. You want to know what slavery feel like? Touch this face. And this is Henrietta, her story as a child in slavery. There was talk all amongst the slaves. The North was coming. And soon we could hear cannon fire in the distance. And we would talk about running to the Yankees, to the Union troops, so we could be free. About 10 of them, they run. And I think they make it because we don't hear nothing. Usually the slave patrol would have brought them back. And they would have been whooped and sold off. And I was afraid, I was afraid Master was going to sell me off. Many of the owners of the slaves in my state, they were taking their slaves further south. Some of them said they went to another country. So I was afraid I would never see freedom. And I hear that cannon fire, and I think I needs to go. Maybe they made it. Maybe them 10 made it. So one day, I decide to leave. I hide in the daytime on the road. I come out at night and walk towards the firing. One night, a slave patrol came by. They's the ones that they would catch us and bring us back to the master for some money. And I hide behind a tree under some branches, and I watch them go by. I see one of them stop, and I think he done seen me. But he reached down and pick up something from the ground, and he keep going. I make it all the way to the Union lines. And they say, you free, but you gotta work for us. I wonder if this is any different from slavery. But they feed me good as they could. And I'd be taking water to the men and during the fight. Fire going on around me, cannons booming. I take the water to them. And I bury them too. this was freedom like. This is freedom. These are the words of John Finley towards the end of the Civil War in Alabama, as the Union troops made it to his state, freeing people. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on to freedom land. And so our fight for social justice is a never-ending battle in our country. We Catholic, and see, we weren't segregated. Well, because in my church, everybody was Black. But in other Catholic churches, they had Black people that could go to that white Catholic church. You had to sit in the back. They were segregated. There were pews that were where you were supposed to sit in the back. And then came the letter from the bishop of our district. And the bishops say, no more segregation in Catholic churches. People can come and sit anywhere. They can go to any Catholic church. Like I said, it didn't have much meaning in our church because it was all Black. But the summertime, we would go to Seidel and we would stay with my grandma. And she went to a Catholic church that had both Black people and white people. And I decided it was time for me to do something to help change the world. I was 16 years old, almost a grown woman. And I had a plan. So I gets to Seidel and see all my cousins are there. We would all come together to hang out with my grandma and to see each other and to give our parents a break. And so I got all my cousins together. See, I was the oldest. And I told them we were going to integrate the Catholic Church in Seidel. We came up with a plan. We were going to go and I was going to sit on one end of the front pew. And my other cousin just under me would sit on the other end and all the little ones in between. They were to sit there all straight and proper and fold their hands and look straight ahead. No matter what anybody said to them, they were just look straight ahead. I had seen them lunch counter, protest. That's what we were going to do. So we got up early on Sunday, got dressed, surprised my grandmother because she usually have to be, come on, get up out of that bed. You know we got to go to church. And I cooked the breakfast early that morning. And I fed the young'uns and I said, Grandmommy, we giving you a break. I'm going to take them early to church. We see you when you get there. And she said, well, go, thank you. And I took my cousins to church. We walked in that church. We the first people there and walk up and sit in the front pew on the left-hand side. Me on one end, my other older cousin on the other end, and the little ones in between. I had told them, you move. And then some white men came in. They saw us. They stood on the corner all talking about us. We could hear them. And they come over. Y'all need to go home back there. You're not supposed to be sitting up here. Go on now. But we didn't move. Don't act like you can't hear me. Get up, go. I saw one of my little cousins look like she gonna move. I cut my eyes at her and she straightened up. So we sat there like we couldn't hear nothing. And pretty soon he get tired of talking to us. And other white folks start coming in and they all looking at us like we crazy and they sit on the right side of the church. And then I can see some Black folks start coming in and they don't know what to do either. So they don't even sit down. They just stand in the back up against the wall and talking about us. And pretty soon the church began to fill up. All the white folks on the right side, all squeezed together. Now, there wasn't no air conditioning, and that little fan wasn't doing nothing. They were just standing there just sweating. The black folks in the back, they sweating up against the wall. And pretty soon the priest come out. He see us sitting in the front row, nobody behind us. And all the folks crowded on the other side and the black folks in the back. Now, he know what that bishop had said. No more segregation in Catholic churches. So he started doing his sermon. Sounded like a Baptist preacher talking about hellfire and damnation and looking straight at us. When we left the church, my grandmother was waiting outside because she had been one of them folks standing up against the back of the wall. She snatched me. Now, you can do what you want to do, but don't be putting my babies in danger. You want to do this thing? Fine. But you leave my babies out of it. And so the next Sunday, I went by myself early, sat right in the middle of the front row. And the same thing happened. All the white folks on the right side of the church, all hot and sweaty, all the black folks standing up against the back wall, all hot and sweaty, week after week. But I guess they get tired of that, because pretty soon some white folks began to sit behind me. Now, they didn't sit in the pew right behind me. They left that one open. And pretty soon black folks started coming over and sitting on both sides, anywhere they wanted to. And that summer, I integrated Side-Dow's Catholic Church. It was time for me to go to confession, like all good Catholics do. So I went early to make my confession. And I remember going into the little room, and he opened the little door, and he could see it was me, and he slammed it shut. The priest would not take my confession. That is the story of Brenda Bouzant Duvalier out of Louisiana, and her part of the battle that she took during the civil rights movement. Our fight for freedom goes on and on and on. It has not stopped just with the ending of slavery. I was late for school, and the principal didn't like it when you were late. She would stand at the front door like this, and you knew you were in trouble. She gonna call your mama. So my mother was yelling, "Cheyenne, go on, get ready. I gotta go to work. Go on, you're gonna be late for school." And so I finally got out, and my friend was waiting for me, and we were running down the block. The school wasn't that far away, but we didn't want to see our principal out there. And as we got closer to our church, we saw these black cars pull up, and all of these men get out. She said, "Cheyenne, that ain't Dr. Martin Luther King. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Look." And she looked. "It's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.," she said. And we watched all these men go up the stairs into the church. Now, we knew we were going to be late, but Martin Luther King Jr. went into my church. So I went into the church with my friend. We went and tucked behind the last pew to listen. And we heard him talking about how there will be a rally in Selma, Alabama at the church that Sunday night. And we must have made a sound, because I was like, "Who?" And he said, "Who back there?" And me and my friend, we peeked up over the pew. "Who are you?" "I Cheyenne Webb." "Come on up here, Cheyenne. Bring your friend." "What y'all doing here? You're supposed to be in school." "You're Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. "Yes, I am. And I'm going to have a rally here in your church on Sunday, and I want you to come, okay? You going to be there?" "I'm going to be there, Dr. Martin Luther King." "Now go on to school. You got to be late." And I ran out the church with my friend. Our principal was waiting at the door. "Cheyenne Webb, you are late for school. You know I don't tolerate lateness. But at the church we saw Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Don't come here lying. It really was. And my friend said it really was. It was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Go on now, go on and go to your class. But later I saw her come into my classroom and then called the teacher to the door, and they were whispering about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She had told the story to everybody of what I said, and she had checked it out. And indeed, Martin Luther King was coming to our community in Selma and doing this big rally at the church. So by the time I got home, my mother knew about it. And when my dad came home from work, he knew about it. And they asked me everything, asked me to tell them everything. And I said, I'm going to go to the rally. He invited me to the rally at the church Sunday night. No. My mother and father were not having it. You are too little. You're 8 years old. You can't go to one of these civil rights meetings. People dying, people getting killed, beat up. You're too young. But Mama, I want to help change things. No, I said no. Now go to your room. But Sunday, when that rally was beginning, I opened my window and I snuck out and I ran down to the church. When I walked in the church, it was filled with people. They were singing. And Dr. Martin Luther King, he saw me come through the door and he waved me up front to stand right next to him. There's photos of me. There's photos of me standing there. And they planned the civil rights movement for Selma. I got my butt whipped that night when I got home. And I got my butt whipped over and over again, because every time there was a rally, every time there was a march, every time there was a meeting, I'd skip school, I'd sneak out the house, I would go. And finally, my parents got tired of it. Cheyenne, we just don't want you to die. Well, come march with me. We will lose our jobs. We can't march. They will fire us. And then what will we do? So I marched with Dr. Martin Luther King at 8 years old. And I remember a civil rights worker was killed. And we decided we were going to march from Selma, Alabama to the Capitol. I went out that day to march in that Selma march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I remember we kneeled down before we started out on that bridge and we prayed. And then we started marching up that bridge. It kind of went like this and then down the other side. When we got to the top of the bridge where it was going to go over, there was a sea of white men there. See, the sheriff of the county had deputized every white man over 21 years old and had called for them to come out and defend the bridge. They had bats and sticks and they were on horses. They had dogs. They had guns with them. And they had that smelly stuff, that tear gas. And when we got to the top of that bridge and we saw them, they saw us. And they started rushing us on them horses and on feet, and they started beating people down. I was so scared that I dropped to my knees to pray again. And this man, he came running by, he lifted me up in his arms and he started running with me. I said, put me down, you're not running fast enough. And he put me down and I ran all the way home. That weekend, Dr. Martin Luther King came back to Selma, Alabama. The world had seen what had happened on that bridge that day. And the world responded. He came, and there were a big crowd of people, and they prayed, and then they walked up to the top of the bridge, and they prayed again. And more people started coming from all over the world, all over the country to Selma, thousands and thousands and thousands, and we marched again. My father came and got me along the way. He knew I was too little to make it the whole way. But he took me to Montgomery. And there I heard Martin Luther King make a speech. He said, "How long will it take us to realize the promise of justice in society?" It was near my birthday time, and my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I said, "I want you to register to vote." See, things had begun to change after that march. The law was passed in 1964, the Voter Rights Act, that said that they couldn't discriminate, they couldn't stop people from voting. I said, "I want you to register to vote." And I went with them. It felt so good after the last march. It was like we had overcome. We had reached the point that we were fighting for a long, long time. And if you were to stand in the midst of the thousands and thousands of people and all the great leaders and political people who had come from all over the world, I asked my mother and father for my birthday present to become registered voters. They took me to the polls with them to vote, and I'll never forget it. And the thing that made it so unique to me was the fact that it was something so simple, just a mark on a ballot. I thought it would be such a long, drawn out thing because of how people had to fight. But it was only the matter of walking into a building and making your mark. It was exciting. It was exciting for them. It was exciting for me to see. And I'll never forget it. My parents voted. My parents voted and made history. After all of the marching and all of the beatings and all of the tear gas and all of the dying, it was simple. The words of Cheyenne Webb, 8 years old, who marched in the Selma marches. I love taking people's words and setting them to music. The history is amazing, it's marvelous, but how do we tell it so people will hear it? A lot of people don't have time to pick up some big old history book and listen to it. So I like to take the words exactly how they are and sometimes sing them, to sing documents like Hannah's sale into slavery. People can hear those stories then. I was tired that day and sad. See, they were going to put Jimmy Reeves to death. They said he had done something bad to this white woman, and he was tried and convicted. They had already decided he was guilty, and he was going to be put to death as soon as he turned 18. See, I went to school with him. We know he hadn't done it. But see, they were going to make a lesson out of him because of all the marching and all of the fighting that was going on to end segregation for us to get our rights. So they were going to make an example out of a 16-year-old boy, kill him when he turned 18. And I was mad. See, I had this teacher had come down from the north to teach. And she was unusual. I loved her teaching. She had us read things that nobody had ever told us had existed before. I was in high school and didn't know. She had us read the Magna Carta. She had us read the U.S. Constitution in full. She had us read all kinds of freedom papers from around the world. And she made sure we knew what our rights were. She had this big afro from the north. Nobody down here in Alabama was wearing that. So I got in a lot of trouble when I went to school. All the kids making fun of me when I cut off all my little braids and I had my little fro. But I was mad. We had spent all that year in high school raising money for his defense to give to the NAACP to save Jimmy's life. We had done movies and sold popcorn and dances and fundraising. And it was all for nothing. They were going to kill him. So the day I got on the bus that day, I was tired and I was angry. And I remember sitting down in the beginning of the black section of the bus. See, they had this slide sign that would slide back. It said color, and the front was for whites. So I sat there looking out the window thinking about all the stuff that was going on. And the bus began to fill up. Black folks, some of them, my classmates, they were in the back. So you got on the front of the bus, you paid, and then you got off the bus and walked around and got in the back door. Sometimes that bus would take off with your money. Anyway, my friends were in the back from school, and I was sitting there. And the front began to fill up with white folks, stop after stop after stop. And pretty soon, all the seats were taken. And there was an empty seat across from me where this black woman was sitting, and she got up and moved for this white woman to sit down. Now, the law said you could not sit across from white folks, so I was supposed to move. But I was thinking, and I was mad, and I was tired of all we had gone through. Every day, day after day, how we were treated. And I didn't move. This white woman come on and she say something to the bus driver, and he look up in the mirror. Now, you know you got to move. Go on, move back. This woman pregnant, give her your seat. But I didn't move. Black man behind the white woman, she get up, and the black girl behind me, she get up. And they give the seat to the white woman, but I'm still sitting there in the middle now of white folks. Go on, girl, you know you got to move. And I hear my friend saying, come on, Claudette, you know you got to move. Move, Claudette. But I said, it's my constitutional right to sit where I want to sit on this bus. I pay my money just like everybody else. I'm not moving. Now go on, girl, said the bus driver. Don't cause no trouble. It's my constitutional right. I'm not moving. I'm not moving. It's my constitutional right. Every indignity that had ever been done to me, every time I had been treated bad because I was black, came up in my belly. I am not moving. It is my right. It's my constitutional right to sit here. The bus driver pulled the bus over. He called a white crossing guard to come in. And he said, that isn't what I do. I can't arrest her. Hold on. I'll get the police. And he get off the bus. My friend said, Claudette, you got to move. They going to arrest you, Claudette. It's my constitutional right. I started crying. It's my constitutional right. It's my constitutional right to sit here. The police got on the bus. And they said, girl, don't make us have to arrest you. You know what we did to that boy. We'll take you to the prison like we took him. It's my constitutional right. It's my constitutional right. And they dragged me off the bus, threw me in the back of a patrol car. And they said, we will take you to the prison. We know how to take care of people like you. I was so scared that they were going to take me and put me in the electric chair. They drove me around for a while, and then they took me to the jail. My classmates had run and told my mother what happened, and she went to the NAACP office, and they sent somebody to get me out. And then they said, we respect what you did, Claudette. Will you join one of our youth organizations? And I say, yeah. And they take me to the other side of the town where, well, some of the more well-to-do Black folks lived. And I went to that meeting. Mrs. Rosa Park ran the meeting. And I went for a while, but I felt funny in that side of town. Like I didn't know them folks. A couple months later, that Mrs. Rosa Parks, I guess she get tired too, because she don't give up her seat. She don't give her seat up in that bus either. People kind of forget a little bit about what I did that day. See, I got pregnant shortly afterwards, and I guess I wasn't no poster child for the civil rights movement. But before Rosa Parks, there were me and others. There were 4 other women named in a lawsuit that changed and ended segregation and ended the bus boycott. But a lot of people don't know me, Claudette Colvin, and how I refused to give up my seat when I was 16 before Rosa Parks on that bus. We remember Claudette Colvin today. I think I have time for one last story. I have a story that I'm developing and thought I would share. I've been pushing in with the YMCA. I work in their after school program. And since we didn't run like after school because of all the virtual schooling that was going on, the principal at the elementary school that I work for allowed some of us artists to push into classes during the daytime. And I did special social studies projects, wrote a play about the detention centers along the border during the last administration, and fortunately they're still there, that the kids just performed virtually on Friday. And in our discussions about social justice, the kids would say sometimes to me, but who's gonna listen to us? And so I'm developing a story I thought I'd share for the first time with you guys called Who Will Listen? Who will listen? Our voices are small. They're not noisy. We have no power, or so it seems. I don't have money. How will anybody hear that I want to change the world? Mary Kopani listened. And she listened to what was going on in her city of Flint, Michigan. And at 8 years old, she started a movement. She wrote to President Barack Obama and said, come here to Flint. Don't you know what's happening here? Are you listening, President? We are being poisoned by lead in our water. We can't even drink it. You need to come to Flint, Michigan. She listened and she spoke out loud, loudly. You cannot allow this to happen to us, America. You must listen and help us. She helped give out free bottled water. She got collected bottles of water from companies. She distributed them. She not only listened, but she helped change Flint, Michigan. Who will listen if you speak in your young voices? How about Malala from Pakistan? At 11 years old, she was fighting for girls to have the right to go to school in a nation that did not believe in the education of girls. You're supposed to just get married, be silent, wear your hijab, stay in the background. But Malala and her parents wanted her to be educated. Her father fought for her education. And at 11 years old, she started a blog talking about her experiences trying to get educated as a girl in Pakistan. She asked the world to listen to my story. This is what's going on. And she was so brave, and people fought so much against her that at one point she was shot. And people thought she was going to die. But she made it. She made it. And she continues to fight for the rights of girls around the world. She is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She listened to the girls around her and to her own heart that says we have a right to be educated just like the boys. And she helped change the world. Who will listen? Jacoby Jabi from Gambia. She listened. She heard the words of her classmate who, like her, wanted to go into the sciences. But girls weren't supposed to go into science. You were supposed to get married. Or if you become a teacher, you teach history. You don't teach math. You don't teach science. But she wanted to be an aerospace engineer. That was her dream. And so she started a robotics club in her high school. She got and recruited girls, and some boys joined to learn more about science. She became a STEM activist and ended up speaking in front of the United Nations during one of their commissions on the rights of women around the world. She spoke about her work getting equal rights in education, in STEM education for girls in Gambia. Who will listen? Marley Dia from the United States, who at 13 years old said, I don't see any books that look like me in the classes I take. There are no brown girls in any of these books, no yellow girls, no Latino girls. Where are our stories? And in fact, there are very few girls, period. Most of these are stories about boys. And she decided that she was going to collect 1,000 books, 1,000 books that featured girls of color. And people listened to her campaign. They started donating books to her. And not only did she collect 1,000 books, she collected 9,000 books and continues to advocate in her teens now for the curriculum of schools to include more girls of color in their history classes and in their literature classes. People listen to Marley now because she listened to her heart that said things need to change. Who will listen? Bana Alabed, who at, do I have age? I think she was 8 years old in war-torn Aleppo, Syria, said this cannot continue. My family is dying. Our house is being bombed. We can't consistently go to school. She didn't even speak English, but her mother did. And so she started a Twitter account, and she would tell her mother what to type in English. People became suspect when they start seeing these little Twitters from a little girl. Oh, come on, this isn't real. But when it was checked out, it was her. It was Bana speaking. Her stories got read around the world. Even Miss Rawlings, who wrote the Harry Potter books, when she said in one of her entries in Twitter, I want to read the Harry Potter books, but we can't buy them here. Miss Rawlings emailed her one of the books. And finally, she was rescued along with her family and 350 other people and taken to Turkey because people listened to what she had to say on Twitter. And so many people, many kids, especially young people, have listened to what's going on around them, and they have helped change the world. Who will listen? Begin with you. Listen to your heart. Listen to what's going on around you. And pick a battle for social justice. Today is Juneteenth, a celebration of the ending of slavery in America, when the last group of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, were told, you are now free in Texas. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Thank you for listening to my stories.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. If you guys want to learn more about Vanessa, you can check out her website and look for any other programs that she might have, including our art camp with her. that will happen August 2nd through the 9th. Thank you once again, Vanessa.